Jai Gurudev, and thank you for joining us today. So, the 29th November 2025 Satsang uniquely combined devotion with movie shooting. How symbolic was this fusion? Jai Gurudev, and thank you for joining us today. So, this Satsang was historically poetic. Satsang, traditionally meaning company of truth, itself became a canvas of storytelling of a feature film titled Wide, inspired by the life and the mission of His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankarji. Devotees didn't just watched the knowledge, they enacted it in real time as supporting actors and background artists. When 375 devotees from four districts of Maharashtra assembled across Maharashtra's diverse geography, they didn't come for glamour, they came for Seva Bhav, the spirit of offering. Yet divine timing turned their devotion into cinema. As Gurudev entered the stage portal, devotees became live cinematographic energy, smiling, clapping, waving, radiating childlike joy. This scene was not staged, it was sahaj or natural. Gurudev's message often says, life itself is Leela, a play, a drama, a wave motion. So the act of devotees joining the movie was not distraction, it was reinforcement of Leela consciousness. The ocean of applause mirrored the metaphor he later gave in the Q&A. Storms will always exist in water, waves will always rise, but the wise surfer rides above waves. uh, Here, movie shooting became waves, devotees became surfers of presence, and Gurudev became the lighthouse of calm amidst action. Everyone sitting still for 10 minutes during the shoot, including Gurudev himself, was a direct demonstration that even when the world is in motion externally, one can rest internally. This satsang turned abstraction into embodiment, devotion, discipline, and drama met without conflict. This is spirituality 5.0, being rooted yet fluid, sacred yet social, meditative yet expressive. It was darshan plus dharma plus digital age storytelling. Now, from a Vedic perspective, yajna isn't just to fire rituals, it is conscious participation in divine orchestration. When devotees took roles in the movie, their smiles became ahutis or offerings, and their stillness became mantra. The blend of art or movie devotion or satsang and consciousness or meditation is akin to the Vedic principle of natya plus naivedya plus nad, or that is performance, offering, and sound. The satsang was a modern natya yagya where claps replaced ghee, smiles replaced flowers, and awareness replaced the culinary offerings. Gurudev sitting with the crowd while shooting continued was the epitome of samadarshan or equal vision. The Guru not above people but among them, showing humility as the highest sovereignty. This is Sanatan Dharma's lived essence. Now, the Columbia Peace Mission was referenced. How does this stage entry during movie shooting represent conflict resolution philosophy? In the Vedas, peace does not mean absence of conflict, it means mastery over conflict. Columbia's civil turbulence, where decades long storms between ideological fractions disrupted national harmony, was not solved by weaponry or negotiations alone. It was solved by Gurudev's soft power diplomacy rooted in consciousness, not coercion. His entering the stage during movie shooting parallels this philosophy. The auditorium was an ocean of energy, lights, cameras, movement, emotions. Yet his entry didn't escalate chaos, it harmonized chaos. This is exactly how Colombia was healed. Factions with different triggers, tempers, egos, and histories were taught to be together above their impulses, releasing pain rather than reinforcing it. In the Satsang movie Fusion, devotees who were background artists were not reacting or anxious, they were participatory witnesses. They clapped, but from inner alignment. This reflects the Colombian model. When conflict exists, do not fight darkness with darkness. Bring a brighter light. Gurudev sitting calmly amidst camera movement is a metaphor for sitting in dialogue without absorbing the insult, anger, or ego. Peace begins when one does not mirror hostility. He once said, even the most violent man has a vulnerable inner child. In Colombia, he addressed militants not as criminals but as humans needing healing and skill upgradation of mind. Similarly, on stage, he didn't demand silence aggressively. His presence magnetized silence. Diplomacy at its peak is not command, it is attraction through authenticity. His walkthrough to the stage was a moving meditation, a visual proof that consciousness stabilizes not just individuals but entire systems. Sudarshan Kriya and the Colombian peace model was used as a tool of a trauma detox. The breathwork dissolved emotional landmines, so negotiations could succeed without emotional hijack. In the satsang, he mirrored the same method. He entered and the energy surged upwards in joy, but not outwards in restlessness. Devotees were part of a moving film, but sitting in a still mind. This is the core of peace building. Raise consciousness, don't raise conflict. The stage isn't high because it is made of wood, it is high because it holds awareness. He elevated the 375 hearts from Maharashtra without elevating a single ego. Now, Gurudev said, storms and waves will always exist in water, rise and surf above the waves. How does this apply to society's collective consciousness? This metaphor is quintessential Sri Gurudev knowledge. Water represents emotion, society, media, turbulence, unpredictability, and world problems. Waves symbolize recurring challenges, political conflicts, polarization, economic anxiety, public outrage, social media insult culture, personal humiliation. His statement affirms the truth. Problems are inherent to existence like waves inherent to water. The goal is not draining the ocean, it is learning to surf. Individual transformation is incomplete without collective elevation. The 375 devotees from four districts of Maharashtra formed a mini civilization, converging as one organism. When the host requested everyone to sit still for 10 minutes to support movie shooting, the crowd obeyed without irritation. That is surfing above collective impatience. Gurudev didn't say waves should stop. He said consciousness must rise above wave behavior. When society breathes unconsciously, waves become tsunamis. Riots, revolutions with violence, reactive leadership prevent cycles, but when breath is conscious, waves become rhythm. Change without damage, expression without explosion, participation without panic. Collective self mastery means a society that can experience provocation but respond with equanimity. In Colombia, this philosophy guided peace. Do not fixate on grievances, rise above them through expanded awareness. When devotees smiled and waved in the movie scene, it was not emotional turbulence, it was synchronized emotional upliftment. Collective consciousness, when elevated, allows problems to exist without becoming identified with them. The Kriya is the surfboard, meditation is the balance, wisdom is the stance, and awareness is the wave rider. The Sanatana Dharma validates this with this multiple duksheshu anudvigna manaha suksheshu vigata spriha. In sorrow, the mind remains undisturbed. In joy, it remains non attached. Society that can carry this state can survive any age. Four districts coming together means four rivers merging, carrying different currents, but resulting in one still ocean. Waves don't disappear, their power is transcended. Now, Gurudev humorously graded insult skill, saying he will give gold medals for better insulting. What is the psychological genius behind diffusing insults this way? This is Vedic wet meeting therapeutic strategy. In ancient scriptures, fierce warriors were pacified not by matching aggression, but by elevating their self image or skill set to absurdity until the ego felt exposed and dissolved. Gurudev does this playfully. When someone insults, the intention is to destabilize identity, trigger defense, invoke a retaliation, but Gurudev refuses to grant the insulter that power. Instead, he shifts the frame. You are not skilled enough to insult, you are B grade. Upgrade your skills and I will give you medals. Suddenly, the insult loses its object. The insulter now becomes the student of insultology. This reverses the power gradient. Instead of Gurudev becoming the attacked person, the attacker becomes the evaluated person. The mind cannot insult a person who is not competing in the insult domain. Humiliation thrives on reaction. When reaction is replaced with humorous non cooperation, the humiliation boomerang returns to sender. This is Sattvic psychological aikido, and the punchline is deeper truth. Insult is a skill of ignorance, not intelligence. When greeted absurdly, the ego recognizes its own pettiness and retreats with dignity fracture instead of violence. The insulter walks away head down, not because of punishment, but because the game board itself changed. Dharma does not silence offenders, it exposes the futility of the offense from a consciousness lens. Insults and negative wave packets, the moment you witness, they collapse without entering your system. Humor accelerates this wave collapse. The middle comment was not ego retaliation, it was identity deconstruction of the insult act itself. Now, in the Q&A, Gurudev said, what is the point of asking questions when answers already exist in Sudarshan Kriya, Pranayama, the guided meditation, and Sahat Samadhi meditation? How do you interpret this for seekers? The Gurudev is redefining knowledge transaction. Most Q&A emerges from intellectual curiosity or emotional disturbance, but Gurudev highlights a paradox. People ask for a solution while carrying the solution in their own breath system, yet not applying it. He didn't discourage questions, he discouraged redundant seeking without practice. If a man asks how to swim while holding a surfboard, the question is not about swimming, it is about learning to use what he already has. Sudarshan Kriya, three stage pranayama, and meditation are not conceptual answers, they are operational answers encoded in breath rhythms. Gurudev's statement means transformation is not found in new answers but in activating existing inner technology. In that satsang, the host asked devotees to sit still for 10 minutes. 375 devotees from Maharashtra became practitioners of applied awareness instead of reactive commentators. Gurudev repeating next question multiple times shows his intent to give short but sharp transmissions, pushing the mind back into practice instead of mental loops. The true guru does not overload information, he overloads awareness until the seeker no longer depends on external answers. Instead of 375 individual mental queries, there were 375 silent inner resolutions happening simultaneously during the shoot. That is the message. A question answered by breath is more powerful than 100 questions answered by words. Kriya is the answer that does not age, debate, decay, or dilute. Now, it also echoes the Upanishadic proclamation Prashnottaram tu Param Brahma. The supreme answer is Brahman itself, experience beyond language. Kriya takes you beyond linguistic Q&A into experiential knowing. Now, he also spoke about keeping the Wi Fi password divine, thoughts password, meditation transforming negativity. Can you unpack this modern metaphor? This metaphor bridges the Vedic psychology with digital era cognition. Password means access code to a system. Wi Fi represents the network of consciousness, collective connectivity of minds in the hall and beyond humanity itself. If the password is petty, egoic, or worldly, one connects to noise, distraction, restlessness. If the password is divine, one connects to higher signal, grace, calm, intuition. Thoughts as password means thoughts authenticate your inner reality. Insulting thoughts validate insecurity. Fearful thoughts validate weakness. Divine thoughts validate expansion. Meditation's password transformation means witnessing thoughts without logging into them. Meditation doesn't delete negativity, it changes the authorization key from reaction mode to witness mode. The negative thoughts automatically reroute into positive insights, like an incorrect password redirecting you to reset mode. So, Darshan Kriya is like backend encryption that resets the nervous system password without typing anything manually. It updates the inner OS. When devotees were smiling and clapping in the movie scene, their password was joy, not judgment, not anxiety about cameras. The host guiding them to sit still for 10 minutes aligned everyone into one conscious access code. Gurudev sitting among the crowd was him saying, I am also connected to the same Wi Fi. There is no separate Guru password. His calm face in the shot was not suppression, but encryption or peace. Vedic teachings always use metaphors of chariots and oceans. Gurudev uses waves and Wi Fi. The principle is same. When you authorize in mind, you experience in life. Reset the password, reset your world. Now, divine password, expanded bandwidth. Meditation password is silence protocol. Kriya is the automatic reset. Now, Gurudev emphasized witness consciousness, the Sakshi Bhav. How was this embodied collectively during the movie shoot? The Sakshi Bhav is not passivity, it is dynamic neutrality. The mind participates without possession. In that 10-minute sitting period, 375 devotees from Maharashtra weren't impatient, irritated, or mentally escaping. They were breathing consciously, letting the shoot happen externally while stillness happened internally. Gurudev himself sat still among the crowd during filming, demonstrating that the highest yogi doesn't demand exemption from worldly activity. He simply doesn't absorb it mentally. Collective Sakshi means 375 minds acting like one lake, not 375 reactive waves. Smiling and clapping in the film was done from awareness, not frenzy. The film captured external joy while sadhana captured the internal joy. This dual layer presence is what resolved conflict in Colombia as well. Participation in dialogue, witness in ego. In Vedic Dharma, the Sakshi is Purusha, the unchanging consciousness witnessing. The Prakriti is motion here. Prakriti was cameras, light, shooting instructions. Purusha was a silent awareness in 375 hearts and in Gurudev's composed face. When Gurudev said next question, it subtly forced devotees to land back in witnessing mode instead of differing into intellectual trivia. The scene was a live example of action with detachment. That is Karma Yoga 2.0. Colombian fractions were taught to witness their rage before responding. Devotees were witnessing their energy before expressing in smiles. That is the art of consciousness, same technique from battlefield to background artist. धर्मा says जो दृश्य बदलता है वह सत्य नहीं जो दृष्टा नहीं बदलता वही सत्य है. The film shot changing visuals, the witness remained unchanged. That is embodiment. Now, how does this satsang symbolize leadership lessons for future generations? Negative leadership in Kali Yuga is collapsing under pressure. Politicians shout louder to prove authority. Gurudev whispers louder through presence. 375 devotees from Maharashtra sitting still for 10 minutes. During shoot shows emotional governance without enforcement. No police, no fear, no hierarchy, only inspiration based obedience. Gurudev sitting among the people while cameras roll shows servant leadership. The Guru didn't say, I cannot sit, I am being filmed. He said through actions, I also pause with you. A leader absorbed in awareness absorbs nothing from insult. The insult grading comment was also leadership brilliance. Leaders don't retaliate, they reframe the arena until retaliation becomes meaningless. Every wave keeps raising and rising in society. Recession waves, outrage waves, the war waves. Gurudev's leadership lesson is don't become the wave department, become the serve department. Tools for this are breath, silence, humor, and equanimity. Future generations watching this film will subconsciously absorb a critical leadership code. Calm is not weakness. Humor is not irresponsibility. Stillness is not absence of participation. True command comes without commanding. Columbia peace was solved not by dominating, but by soft power consciousness upgradation. Similarly, movie shoot was not micromanaged, it was presence managed. When he said next question, it was limiting noise and expanding clarity. Future leaders must learn to cut excess mental traffic without cutting human expression. This satsang preserved in the film will train leadership not through MBA case studies, but through episodic consciousness imprinting. A leader is successful not when conflict stops, but when conflict stops inside the leader. Now, the breath led leadership over threat led leadership, that is the tagline of this era. Now, as an organization, how should the Vatican Sansthan preserve and transmit such moments? The preservation must be multi-layered documentation, darshan value, dharmic interpretation, and practical transmission into sadhana modules. The Vatican Sansthan should archive this as a living dharma movement, not just an event. Four districts of Maharashtra joining means geographical dharma consolidation. This should be stored like a yatra milestone. We record how hearts responded, not just how cameras responded. The movie White itself becomes a dharma communication medium, White representing purity, peace, trauma detox, unity. Vidya should frame this in four pillars. The dharma content, meaning the wave, sakshi, bhav, insult reframing, the dharma practice. Sudarshan Kriya is answer engine, the dharma seva. Devotees participating as background artists is modern seva. The Dharma leadership guru sitting among people transmission should include sessions teaching the metaphor of divine password, making meditation relatable to youth. This movement proves that cinema can be a dharmic carrier if consciousness is the director. The Vedic Sansan must ensure seekers watching the film are guided to decode the deeper dharma beneath drama. We must store not just video but interpretation manuals, Q&A essence, devotee energy field insights, and application frameworks for emotional intelligence. Future generations should be able to meditate on this event like a teaching capsule, like how Vedas were orally preserved through Shruti Parampara. We now preserve Dharma through Drishya plus Shruti plus visual testimony plus spoken wisdom. Now, finally, what was the biggest takeaway from the satsang? Jagat, the biggest takeaway was a single truth demonstrated in six frames. Devotion can participate in the world without losing the inner seat. Stillness can exist inside action. Answers exist in breath before words. Humor dissolves ego faster than argument, and witness mode transforms the insult format itself. The Guru sits among you, not above your breath. The fact that 375 devotees from four districts sat still upon request shows that when awareness rises, impatience falls without resistance. Gurudev entering state amid cinematic chaos. Without chaos, entering him is direct consciousness training. Keep Wi-Fi password divine means what you connect your mind to decides the world experience. Meditation as password reset means negative thoughts come but cannot authenticate unless we authorize reaction mode. His insult gold medal comment shows identity reframing at peak emotional Intelligence repeating next question was not dismissal, it was mental traffic control. Gurudev sitting with people while shoot continued proves karma yoga embodiment. But above all, waves will always exist, but surf is a choice, not a waves' permission. The satsang was not to tell people how to rise above problems, it was to show them rising above them even while cameras film problems. Spirituality is no longer escape, it is participation without mental possession. For Dharma, the biggest takeaway is presence is the real ritual, breath is the real answer, and awareness is the real state. Smiles are the real offering, stillness is the real sovereignty. Now, the film has multiple producers across continents. How does this international backing serve the narrative's global intent? The participation of producers from India, Hong Kong, USA, and London shows that white is not a domestic story wearing international clothing. It's a legitimately international mission translated into cinema. Mahavir Jain, coming from an Indian production lineage, holds the spiritual integrity of the subject. His role is not just to finance, but to carry the essence of Gurudev's presence, the calm, non commercial devotion, first compass that ensures the film remains grounded in truth, not theatrical exaggeration. The Peacecraft pictures from Hong Kong adds geopolitical gravitas. Hong Kong's cinema ecosystem is historically known for blending tactical thrillers with emotional storytelling. Their involvement positions the Colombian conflict resolution story in the high stakes diplomatic and covert strategizing genre rather than a conventional spiritual documentary drama tone. The conscious studies of USA brings the consciousness research and wellness narrative into Hollywood's moral storytelling framework, showing that peace is not a passive sentiment but an engineered inner science. Like a productions from London ensures the distribution strategy aligns with Europe, UK, and Western film markets, where political thrillers and war biopics have mass appetite. The Colombian line production houses Jaguar Bite brings on ground authenticity, dialect, terrain, guerrilla psychology, jungle realism, and guns down tension and cultural nuance. The global intent is amplified because the story arcs across five emotional capitals of fear, fury, forgiveness, fatigue, and freedom. These emotions are not nationality bound. Every country understands displacement, grief, insult, hostility, ego, and survival. What makes the film global is that the solution, the breath, meditation, witness, consciousness, and forgiveness is universally human. The satsang connection during filming even highlights this further. The 375 devotees sat still, smiled, clapped, and participated in movie shooting as a live example. That global shift started with local hearts sitting in unity. This international producer backing ensures the film speaks to intelligence agencies through drama, trauma survivors, through motion, emotion, and youth through inspiration. Now, from a dharmic standpoint, the producer consortium itself becomes a yagya of nations, each offering their resource into one fire of storytelling. Backing serves dharma's global rebroadcast. Now, actor preparation has been intense. How important is Vikrant Masi's internal sincerity while portraying an enlightened leader? Neither the Vikrant Masi is not just playing a politician or rebel general, he is portraying a conscious statesman disguised as a spiritual master. That requires more than hair, posture, or wardrobe accuracy. The most visible risk is portraying an enlightened global leader as accidental caricaturization, depicting a calmness as stiffness, silence as absence of motion, compassion as fragility, humor as a casual negligence, and insult handling as arrogance. But Vikrant is preparing from inside out, not outside, and growing here long to resemble Gurudev is surface dedication. Studying his body language and stage presence is craft dedication. Observing his videos and satsangs is contextual dedication. But the real training is mental sincerity. Gurudev does not act calm, he recites in calm. For an actor, the challenge is mimicking a state that is not coming from fear suppression, but awareness embodiment. Vikrant is studying how Gurudev holds space without holding an egoic perimeter. His meeting with Gurudev at the ashram last year was not a producer photo op, it was actor to subject consciousness transmission. He is training to portray a man who solves 52-year wars without raising his pitch, solves ideological hatred without hating ideologies, grades insults without insulting back, and sits among people instead of sitting above their applause. Internal sincerity matters because the film's most important non dialogue scenes will be micro expressions, calm eyes meeting violent faces, breath slowing before a bullet show slow, Silence entering arranged chaos, and smile without seeking validation, answering a shot without diminishing, and witnessing storms without internal weather report. Vikrant facing criticism about retirement post shows meta alignment with Gurudev's philosophy. Do not be insulted by insult department. Portraying Gurudev sincerely means portraying enlightenment as human accessible, not superheroic. Cinema must show that consciousness is not mystical exemption. It is practical emotional adulthood with the divine Wi-Fi passwords plugged into breath rather than ruined circuits. Dharma requires arjava, the inner honesty. Without it, impersonation becomes imitation. With it, imitation becomes inspiration. Now, the irony that Gurudev does not speak Spanish is highlighted in development. How does the narrative convert this irony into strength? The irony is narrative gold because it leverages a deeper principle. Truth does not need translation. Experience does. Gurudev not speaking Spanish demonstrates that peace was not language diplomacy, it was bread diplomacy. In the Colombian peace mission, negotiations were held across ideological languages, emotional languages, and literal languages. But the breakthrough didn't happen when sentences align, it happened when breaths align. Cinema will depict this irony not as a limitation but leverage. A man who cannot speak Spanish pacifies the Spanish speaking guerrilla commanders, not by grammar or rhetoric, but by resetting their nervous system password through pranayama, stillness, and collective witnessing. In film logic, conflicts intensify when meaning is not understood, but White shifts a meaning to precognitive communication, breathing together before talking together. This becomes strength because it places Gurudev as an unpredictable asset in government versus rebel negotiation rooms. Rebels expected threats or arguments, they encountered breath work. Governments expected protocol, they encountered silence driven strategies. Audience expects bilingual dialogue, they encounter multilingual peace engineering without linguistic dependency. The irony becomes dramatic pivot when FARC commanders in Cuba realize that someone who can't insult back, as he joked in the Satsang, and can't speak their mother tongue still holds more psychological sovereignty than men carrying guns, slogans, and ideological dictionaries. That gap creates cognitive dissonance in violent minds watching the film. Why are we fearful of a calm man who doesn't even speak our language? Because his Wi Fi password is divine and ours is vengeance. The irony also honors humility. Gurudev entering jungles, negotiations, and filming crowds without demanding linguistic authority shows that power does not come from dominating communication, it comes from being a communication neutral peace protocol. The outcome was peace, not speech. That makes irony a scripted strength, turning audiences from language admiration to breath application. In the Vedic context, mono, the silence, is a universal language. Irony becomes strength when translated into Shruti, not Vak, that is vibration, not wording. Jayadeva, so the film references the Kali Assembly hostage crisis of 2002. How should this real historical trauma be handled in a thriller narrative responsibly? Rather, the Kali hostage crisis is a watershed trauma moment in modern Latin American history. Cinema often misuses hostage arcs for shock value or political blame, but this film must handle trauma by honoring three stakeholders: the victims, the perpetrators, and witnesses. Trauma thriller narratives that typically fuel adrenaline and outrage. Responsible trauma thriller narratives fuel emotional remembrance without emotional rewounding. The tension must serve a higher knowing. Even when 11 legislators were taken hostage during Kali Assembly, chaos was not cured by retaliation alone. It needed internal governance of conflict and white that the depiction should maintain psychological dignity. Victims must not be portrayed as collectibles of suffering. They must be characters of emotional consequence. Perpetrators of our commanders like Plomo and Plomo B grade insult handlers must not be demonized into non human territory. They must be portrayed as minds stuck in ideology authentication loops, needing a password resets. The witnesses of devotees clapping and sitting still for camera shooting during the satsang mirrors this. Do not turn pain into rage loop, turn pain into awareness lens. The thriller must depict hostage rooms where breath replaces aggression before rescue replaces negotiation. We should show tension ethically. Legislators fearful but not portrayed as weak stereotypes, rebels suspicious but not cartoonishly villainous. Gurudev entering negotiations calmly, not dramatically fearless, but practically non competitive in fear department. The film should also show human fallback costs of 52 air war, hunger, jungle fatigue, youth losing childhood courts to gun sounds, families losing homes before policy papers lost debates. Responsible handling means highlighting that forgiveness meetings after 2016 accord signing were more courageous than war rooms before it. The drama must be bi-layered: jungle realism, consciousness realism. Trauma isn't minimized, it is contextualized into transformational arc, not vengeance arc. Trauma thriller must translate history into healing, not horror. Now, the peace accord was signed in 2016 when Gurudev also received Colombia's highest civilian honor. How can the film balance individual credit with collective national triumph? The piece is never the biography of one man, it is the autobiography of a transformed collective. Although Gurudev received Colombia's highest civilian honor the same year, President Santos received the Nobel Peace Prize as a historical alignment miracle. White must not portray peace as one hero saving passive millions. It must depict one conscious catalyst activating millions of heroes, 260,000 lives lost, and millions displaced. Is not background context, it is emotional architecture of the story. The film should carefully balance credit by using mirrored symbolism. When Gurudev entered the stage during Satsang filming and sat still with 375 devotees from Maharashtra during the 10-minute shoot, it projected the Samadarshan. The Guru is not claiming elevation, he is sharing elevation. Peace accord signing was a signing of a breath transformed nervous system of a nation before signing of ink on policy parchment. The honor he received symbolizes a global acknowledgement of spiritual diplomacy, but the national triumph belongs to every mother who didn't retaliate after losing home, every rebel who dropped guns before ideology dropped them, every youth who exalted vengeance to inhale freedom, and every witness who changed passwords from rhetoric to breath. Biopic thriller tone must show that Gurudev opened the door, but Columbia walked through it. You balance individual credit by emphasizing individual inner technology, not individual outer glorification. The film should also contrast what credit means in different domains. The Nobel Peace Prize is a geopolitical credit, the highest civilian honor is national credit, but the real triumph is ego down emotional credit. The 375 devotees from Maharashtra sitting still, smiling and clapping during filming without seeking screen spotlight. That behavior is a true triumphing collectively. The insulter walking away head down in Gurudev's earlier joke is metaphor. The B grade egos walk away when you stop competing in ego arenas. Similarly, guns walk away when nations stop competing in gun psychology arenas. Balance is achieved when we show peace being a shared stage, not a solo stage. Now, in Dharma, credit is distributed as grace, not gathered as crown. Whether this film draws from the Narcos creative ecosystem, how can a thriller wellness forgiveness arc avoid glamorizing violence when the crew is historically linked to crime thriller successes? The Narcos' creative DNA is a double-edged cinematic sword. It understands violent psychology, cartel tension, jungle noir, and political corruption gradients and thriller pacing. But White has one difference. Narcos wrote violence narratives that explain chaos. White writes a narrative that resets the chaos. The way to avoid glamorizing violence is not to give it aesthetic victory or narrative magnetism. You don't airbrush guns, slogans, ambush, or cartel characters like Plomo into glamorous music sequences or heroic editing betrayal arcs. Instead, you depict them as psychological reptiles draining emotional civilizational bandwidth. Violence can appear factually, but it must not be aestheticized by soundtracks, slow motion, or hero arcs. If narco cinematography used coke bag symbolism as narrative props, White should use breath bag symbolism instead. Pranayama packets replacing violence packets. Instead of glorifying the cartel boss, glorify cartel collapse moment of witnessing. One scene should show a rebel general being insulted by his own mind before being insulted by opponent, then being graded absurdly by Gurudev's insult choke until the ego department collapses. Violence is glamorized when it is portrayed as strategic intelligence or emotional adulthood, but White reinforces that violence is strategic mind immaturity stuck in ideology authentication loops. The biggest ideological storm does not end when ideology surrenders, it ends when insult circuit cannot emotionally authenticate anymore. This film must portray Colombia jungles violently, but youth's faces non-violently, remembering violence for transformation. Filming while devotees clapped and smiled shows a cinema trope. Energy is not intensity, awareness is intensity. The Narcos crew can be used as craft instruments, not message instruments. They can deliver pacing and tension, but the message must deliver human bandwidth upgrade via breath, meditation, divine Wi Fi passwords, and forgiveness gatherings. Guns appear, but breath leads the final direction cue. Violence enters stage left, peace remains the center stage. Dharma must always win aesthetically. Do not make darkness look like Diya. Now, the film is planned for global markets and festivals in 2026. How does its outreach strategy tie back into Gurudev's mass appeal without compromising depth? The outreach strategy must follow two parallel tracks: the global appetite plus inner appetite. Global audiences love thrillers that cross CIA, jungles, negotiations, rebels, and covert operations. But inner appetite loves stories that transform the nervous systems, depersonalize grudges, and reset insult departments and activate forgiveness gatherings beyond rhetoric. We tie mass appeal into Gurudev's appeal by showing authentic transformation sequences instead of sermon sequences. Gurudev's mass appeal is not about lecturing masses, it is masses experiencing the inner relief in his presence. The 375 devotees from four districts of Maharashtra sitting still for a camera shoot is exactly the global image cinema wants to consume. Large group emotional governance without physical governance. His insult gold medal joke also signals mass appeal because the mind loves a comedy that collapses ego without ego collapsing it first. Distribution meetings planned at Sunil Adam, MIPCOM, and AFM will place this film in the political thriller aisle, but the film itself should place the audience's mind in witness aisle. Depth is preserved when we encode breathing protocols visually. Festivals adore sincerity, awards adore originality, markets adore mass emotion, Netflix audiences adore narrative pacing. But what makes the film untold is this: no war biopic shows peace directors sitting 10 minutes with background actors as peace engineers before peace accord was signed. We preserve depth without compromising outreach by letting marketing highlight global stakes, but cinema highlight the inner stakes. We must show that Gurudev influenced not by ideology conquest, but ideology de-authentication via breath encryption. Outreach isn't shallow if the film speaks to every emotional age group: youth emotional bandwidth, the Francisco arc, statecraft emotional neutrality, governments rebel emotional vulnerability, FARC, victim emotional courage, forgiveness meeting sincerity is mass magnet, respect is depth anchor, festivals consume dharma when dharma is the screenplay. Now the film crosses Cuba, India, and Colombian jungles. How important are the cultural intersections in the screenplay for sustaining the global unity message? The cultural intersections are not backdrop, they are the conflict resolution terrain itself. When a screenplay moves from Colombian jungles, the raw realism of war, slogans, insurgency, ideologies to Havana negotiations, intellectual ideological Cold War rooms to Indian ashrams, consciousness diplomacy warm rooms, it shows that the world's conflicts exist in different continents, but the solution centers to one human coordinate: the breath, awareness, and forgiveness. Intersections are important because polar minds cannot be healed by a same cultural mirror. You de authenticate ideology by showing ideological leaders confronting their own cognitive firewall resets via different wisdom languages: Colombian dialect via terrain, Cuban dialect via diplomacy, Indian dialect via consciousness. Screenplay must show that guns, propaganda, negotiation rooms, and insult cultures are multi country industries, but peace, pranayama, and witness consciousness is a universal network protocol. Cultural intersections sustain global unity. When we show characters like Francisco seek peace through different cultural signposts but arrive at same breath access, quote at Gurudev administers, screenwriting must show Cuba as mind game hotspot where hardened militants are softened by breath without speaking Spanish, ironically, and meditation. India is ancient wisdom Wi Fi hotspot where password is divine, not political. Colombian jungles as terrain hotspots where silence encrypts more than gunfire encrypts fear. Cultural intersections show vascular shift. A conflict moves across geography. Peace remains geographical constant. Preserve intersections responsibly to transmit a global slogan free message. Unity of inner practice over unity of outer ideology. Intersection must upgrade humanity, not a reboot propaganda. Now, the screenplay spans 6 years of script development. How can spiritual diplomacy be scripted without turning it into passive monologue sequences? The scripting of spiritual diplomacy is complex because diplomacy on paper is command tone, strategy tone, policy tone, negotiation tone. Spiritual diplomacy is silence tone, breath tone, witness tone, humor tone, forgiveness tone without competitive ego. Over 6 years of script development, Montu Basi, as writer director, must transform spiritual sequences into operational scenes rather than monologue sequences. Show Gurudev teaching FARC militants breathing protocols without Spanish in Cuba, but not through sermon, through tension relief micro scenes where militant shoulders drop, heartbeat lowers, and rifle barrel lowers only after mine barrel lowers first. Avoid passive monologues by writing action coded dialogue, short answers, reframes, insultology, gold medal jokes delivered without insult emotion. Next question as mental pacing tool. 10 minutes silent sitting as cinematic direction cue. Scenes must show Gurudev sitting among masses while external shooting continues, which shows detachment without passivity. Right diplomatic sequences like internal negotiations before external negotiations. Spiritual diplomacy isn't passive when it is non reactive and playful but neuro-effective. Rewrite sequences until the audience forgets speech and remembers breath. Real diplomacy is not spoken Spanish, Hindi, or English. It is authentic, applied silence, selecting peace over ideology servers. Now, script spiritual diplomacy like mantra, not monologue. Now, if you had to summarize the films as dharmic and consciousness backbone in one cinematic principle, what would it be? Water will always have waves, but a stage held by the witness will never wave back at waves. This principle was demonstrated in the satsang itself. 375 devotees from 4 districts of Maharashtra smiled, clapped, waved from stillness inside, sat 10 minutes for camera shooting without reacting, and Gurudev himself sat among them while film drama continued externally. This shows the Sanatan Dharma's operating system: participate but don't possess, answer but don't claim, laugh at insults but don't insult back, serve waves but don't ask waves for permission, connect Wi-Fi password to divine, not to disturbance servers. The backbone of White is not conflict resolution, it is ego deauthorization first, gun deauthorization next. Script and screen must carry this dual chassis, jungle realism plus breath realism. The world problems are waves, Gurudev's solutions are surfboard, protocol, Sudarshan Kriya plus pranayama plus meditation, be it guided or Sahaj Samadhi, that elevate without lecturing. Film must show that peace is not geography, not language, not awards alone. Peace is authentication format of mind itself. Switching to witness consciousness, when you change the inner password, outer storm still exists but can't enter your system. The cinematic principle is 150-year scriptures meet 52-year war meet 6 year screenplay meet 375 silent practitioners from Maharashtra. Yet truth remains a single shot: peace through breath, forgiveness through witnessing, and triumph through non competition with ego. Now, the satsang had cameras rolling and devotees performing for the film simultaneously. How can one manage such collective energy without slipping into chaos? What happened on 29 November 2025 was not merely crowd control, it was crowd coherence, a fundamentally different phenomenon. Gurudev has always taught that energy is never the problem and awareness is. A river is not noisy because it flows, it becomes destructive when it does not know its direction or banks. Similarly, when the cameras began rolling, a devotees instantly became part of a larger flow. The host's request to sit still for 10 minutes was not treated as an instruction of inconvenience, it became a direction of awareness. When 375 people sit together, they form a human electromagnetic field. If each mind is thinking at a different amplitude, excitement, impatience, self consciousness, judgment, then the field becomes interference. But if each mind adopts the same inner stance, the field becomes resonance. Smiling, clapping, waving were not emotional spikes, they were synchronized spikes anchored on steady breath. This is the same principle that worked in Colombia. You do not ask gorilla minds to stop feeling fury, you ask them to feel fury without letting it dictate action. The moment you witness instead of react, collective energy is elevated, not scattered. Gurudev himself, sitting during the film shoot, was another master stroke. He modeled the state physically so that 375 nervous systems could mirror the inner pause rather than emotional acceleration. In yogic science, stillness has more gravitational pull than movement, silence has more magnetism than slogans. The best management of collective energy is not silencing it forcibly, but giving it one shared field of consciousness to submit to. The devotees cooperated because their excitement was devotional, not ego driven. This satsang has now become a live training module in handling intensity without identity entanglement, the first step of mastering chaos anywhere on earth. Now, in Dharma, the mind that knows its altar does not burn in its own fire. Now, Gurudev took very short answers, repeating next question multiple times. Why would the master minimize words in a hall and an amphitheater that came seeking words? This again belongs to how Vedas describe a realized teacher. Eka Shabda, Aneka Artha, one word, multiple awakenings. Gurudev uses brevity not because he lacks elaboration, but because his aim is not giving answers. His aim is removing the questioner from the question. A question lives as long as the ego that authored it lives. The war in Colombia lived not because guns were strong, but because grievances were fed like daily ration. When Gurudev says next question, he is practicing mental discontinuation of emotional loops. It's a gentle redirection away from the mind's addiction to conflict narratives and the solution shopping. Words produce intellectual satisfaction. Breathing produces existential resolution. When the answer already exists as a method rather than memory, asking for it again is like asking the sun for flashlight batteries. Short answers shock the intellect awake. Repetition of next question works like a hard reset button to the linear mind. It does not let the mind spiral into over analysis. It trains the seekers to move from question to consciousness to solution consciousness to witness consciousness. The style is also cinematic gold for White. The story is a political thriller where every word matters, but he uses few words because truth is not thriller dialogue, truth is thriller antidote. Gurudev was compressing consciousness transmission in capsules. Instead of a 3-minute philosophical answer to one person, he gave a 3-second existential answer to 375 people at once from Maharashtra. This brevity is purposeful. His goal is to say just enough to silence noise but not enough to stimulate egoic debate. Real peace is not verbose, it is self evident. When a master minimizes words, he maximizes awareness as listening rather than awareness as curiosity. That night words were few but realizations were plenty. That is a growth strategy. That is dharma pacing. That is breath based resolution. The man who solved a 52-year-old war did not become dependent on a 52-minute answer sequence. He taught the world to stop asking waves for explanation and start serving waves through using breath as the board. Now, the film claims no propaganda and focuses on humanity, but political thrillers often become accusatory. How does one ethically narrate ideological factions like government versus FARC without choosing sides? In White, the sides are not narrative. Heroics are heroes, pain is the villain, awareness is the hero. Ethics in political storytelling breaks when you portray one side as angelic and the other as monstrous. But reality is subtler. Both sides were hurt, polarized, exhausted, ego struck, ideology authenticating, trauma fed, and distrust governed for 52 years. When filmmaking chooses breath as the narrator, it no longer needs to choose a faction. Spiritual diplomacy does not agree with FARC ideology nor attack government ideology. It attacks the nervous system, the state that made ideologies non negotiable. Ethical thriller scripting should show that the government wanted peace as policy. FARC wanted peace but feared losing identity in absence of war. Civilians wanted peace but didn't know how to produce it inside themselves. The only true ally of peace was upgraded consciousness. The film should ethically display the suffering statistics 260,000 dead plus dead, millions displaced, not to blame, but to give emotional consequence without emotional discrimination. Gurudev entering negotiations silently without Spanish became the neutral watermark of peace. Similarly, the film should speak in three cinematic emotional languages: empathy, clarity, dignity, even while presenting unrest. in three literal languages, the Hindi, English, Spanish. If a faction shouts slogans in the film, let calmness walk across scenes in a non-subtitle inner current. If violence appears, let breath be the editor's final frame, not guns. If our commanders insult, let humor greet them, not vengeance. If victims approach perpetrators post 2016, let forgiveness be shown as collective courage, not as selective reconciliation. Ethical ideological storytelling means truth is the director, Montu, breath is the screenplay, peace is the protagonist, and ego is the B grade extra that must walk away. You do not select sides, you deauthorize sides internally. So peace is not ideology compromise, but ideology transcendence. Now, the amphitheater saw smiles, claps, waving, and filming discipline. How does Gurudev convert ordinary human expressions into spiritual elevation without suppressing their naturalness? Gurudev, in the Vedic lens, expression is never the enemy of elevation. Gurudev's genius lies in transforming impulses into offerings or ahutis, emotions into vibration or nada, movements into mantra, and applause into awareness. When devotees smiled and clapped as His Holiness Gurudev Shishya Vishankati entered, they were not projecting emotion outwards, they were offering emotion upwards into a higher field of presence. Dharma teaches that every human faculty can either become a knot, a granthi, or an offering or a arpana. Gurudev never cuts faculties, he upgrades their function. He joked about insult medals not to encourage verbal retaliation, but to collapse the psychological ownership of insult itself. Similarly, clapping was not entertainment, it became natya yagya participation, where hands moved but minds remained still. Silence was not muteness, it was collective mana protocol. Smiling was not reaction, it was awareness choosing uplift instead of interference. Sitting during film shooting was not forced inactivity, it was karma yoga posture, action happening outside, peace happening inside. This is the same methodology he used with FARC rebels. You don't ask them to stop being strong, you ask them to stop needing anger to authenticate strength. You don't ask youth to stop pain, you teach them to witness pain until it can't dictate identity. The film and the satsang show the same principle. Do not suppress the world, sit above the world inside yourself. Gurudev converts expression into elevation by removing egoic why am I doing this and replacing it with conscious for what am I doing this. The answer is always for love, for witness, for unity, for peace. Ordinary expressions become extraordinary when they are performed from awareness, not craving of reaction cycle. Now, the script took 6 years to build, but the filming began only this year. Why does responsible peace storytelling need such a long incubation period? Because peace is not a script, as peace is a state, and scripting a state responsibly demands digestion, not dramatization. Montubasi and Siddharth Anand handle not just plot complexity, but emotional and cultural complexity. When your subject is a man who resolves wars without violence and insults without retaliation, the writing must mature to this level of non definition by conflict. Over 6 years, the script was not being written for pages, it was being written for perspective. A political thriller tends to become loudest over drafts, more guns, more intensity, more explosive arcs, more hero glorification. But White needed the opposite maturation, more stillness, more breath, more witnessing, more vulnerability, more humor, more forgiveness, and less information noise. Incubation time ensures the writer learns not to attach ego to the war, not to possess political credit, and not to let cinematic portrayal hijack the dharma tone of storytelling. Film writing requires emotional adulthood, remembering 260,000 deaths without turning it into cinematic vengeance scripts, depicting rebels without villain fetish, depicting the guru without saint pedestal overdose, incubating scenes until love paces the thriller, not adrenaline. Filming began when the script reached witnessing neutrality readiness, not award readiness. Responsible peace storytelling is like you heat it slowly, filter it quietly, store it patiently, and pour it confidently. Only then does the flame burn steady without smoke. 6 years ensured cultures understood each other before dialogues were exchanged and breaths would be exchanged before guns would be lowered. This incubation was not delay, it was purification of direction password. During filming, Gurudev sat among the devotees for 10 minutes. For cinema, this is unusual. For spirituality, this is natural. But how does this impact audience subconsciously? Like that, this scene is neurosymbolic programming. Cinema audiences are wired to see gurus, generals, presidents, or revolutionaries always portrayed above the crowd on balconies, podiums, war rooms, elevated platforms. Gurudev sitting within the film, the audience assaults at hierarchy visually. The subconscious reads it as authority is not altitude, awareness is altitude. The mind sees sameness before it sees solutions. This implants a powerful dharma code. Humility is not inferiority, humility is emotional sovereignty that no insult can penetrate. Because the man who can sit among 375 people from Maharashtra while 52-year wars are depicted visually holds more internal governance than any ideology shouting chariot. The subconscious also decodes rhythm. When an unusual pause happens in a thriller film, the subconscious pays attention deeper than dialogue heavy sequences. The 10-minute collective sitting is not filler, it's psychological tension detox before tension climax. The audience watching this later will subconsciously experience a microkriya because stillness is contagious, breath is mimetic, witness consciousness travels non-verbally like Shruti. The film scenes that depict healing responsibly activate the mirror neuron of calm, the same neurons deactivated by fear-based media over decades. He is sitting silently among the devotees visually says, I am not separate from you. So peace is not separate from you either. The subconscious stops a hero shopping and starts state capturing. This is how a film becomes a meditation instruction without verbal meditation. Dharma and cinema both understand the power of pause without suppression, stillness without withdrawal, sitting without disengagement. His presence communicates meditative gravitas without a single mantra being recited aloud. Now, a threshold of 375 devotees is mentioned. Why is the number itself sacred when mass participation is involved? The numbers become sacred when they represent coherence, convergence, and joint witnessing. 375 here is not just a count, it's a collective sadhana cluster that cooperated internally and externally during filming. In modern storytelling, we often romanticize massive crowds as background noise, but here the crowd was background awareness, not background interference. 375 devotees coming from four districts of Maharashtra is like four data channels routing into one access point. When synced, the signal is clear like collective Sudarshan Kriya encoded in action before accord was signed. The number also indicates field momentum for distribution. Global cinema believes in data more than devotion stories alone, but this number contains both. Each district had its own social currents, emotional cultures, political optics, and human dialects, but all were seated in one shared protocol of Mona plus breath plus smile from witnessing. While the war claimed millions, peace here claimed 375. That night to demonstrate peace is transmitted collectively but digested individually. For audiences watching White, this number subconsciously says peace building is not a secret meeting between three men in a back room. Peace building is 375 hearts sitting silently together without competing for emotional spotlight while cameras roll. 375 is sacred here because each one obeyed awareness, not impatience. The magic lies not in size but sameness, not in applause but composure, not in camera drama but internal dharma coded suspension of ego. When a number represents unity of state, it becomes sacred of narrative preservation. In Yakya also, what matters is not size but the samarpan count. Now, the character of Francisco begins as violence and ends in peace. How does such a transformation arc differ from fictional redemption arcs and align with the Gurudev's real interventions? The fictional redemption arcs are often emotional metamorphoses fueled by guilt, shame, revenge, tragedy, or heroic compensation. But the transformation arc in White, especially for Francisco, is not redemption coming from drama, it is relief coming from awareness. Francisco does not transform because he is punished by history. Francisco transforms because he stops being punished by his mind. His arc aligns with how hardened the factions changed, not when ideology signed peace, but when breath signed inner truths first. Gurudev's interventions were never moral monologues saying violence is bad. He reframed the identity of violence itself, sometimes absurdly like the insult gold medal joke, until the ego that authored violence felt exposed by its own futility. Francisco begins by believing violence authenticates identity. He then meets a mentor Gurudev via Montu's screenplay, who refuses to compete in fear or insult domain. This collapses the psychological pedestal of violence inside Francisco. The password reset of Francisco's internal system via breathing protocols, humor reframing, witness awareness, and forgiveness stream is what moves him from ambush to awareness. Different from fictional redemption, Francisco's transformation is shown in operational sequences, heartbeat slowing before rifle slowing, lungs opening before dialogue opening, and ego collapsing before slogans collapse. Francisco ends not as a man redeemed by history but released by himself. That is Gurudev's real fingerprint in conflict resolution anywhere. Do not fight the mind, upgrade the mind until the fighting feels childish. The arc does not glorify drama, it glorifies direction, resolution, dignity, detachment, and finally freedom. That is transformation 2.0, not redemption 1.0.